All right, guys, we'll go ahead and get rolling. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Really excited about this next session. I think most of you are aware of the man sitting next to me. It's Ernie Johnson of Turner Sports, our 2021 co-National Sportscaster of the Year, here to give us the real inside story, tips, tricks, and tales from hosting a studio show. And I'll give it right to Ernie.
No, please, sit down. No, thanks for being here this morning, y'all. I don't know exactly what form this is going to take. I would assume a few opening remarks, and then I just want us to just kind of talk. I'd like to kind of get an idea for who in the room is, new in the business, who are students, award winners in here. I know, so how many students do we have in here? You guys are dismissed. And how many state award winners do we have? Oh, this is impressive. Very cool. And after an hour of this, I'll confess to anything with the brightness of that light in the back. But look, I just, if you would have told me at any point in my career that I would be hosting a show like Inside the NBA and that this is, that I'll be sitting in that chair for 30 years, I would have said you're crazy. And this is especially for you youngsters, because I was sitting right where you were sitting once upon a time saying, where's this career going to take me? And how do I break in? And so just to give you a little background, I was at the University of Georgia. Yeah, my dad was a baseball player, played for the Milwaukee Braves back in the 50s. And so I always wanted to be a baseball player. And I took that dream as far as I could take it. I walked on at the University of Georgia back in 1975 as a freshman. And made the team, and then was told to walk off as a sophomore. So that was the extent of my college baseball career at Georgia. But then you get to a point there, it's like, so what am I going to do? I thought I was an English major. I'll be an English major and a baseball English teacher and a baseball coach. Keep my hand in the game and do something that I love, because I've always loved to write. Always loved the English language. And my dad was a broadcaster, and he never pushed me in any way of saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. I know you wanted to be a ball player like me, but that didn't happen. I'm a broadcaster, you be a broadcaster. He never really went that direction with me. But once I tried it, and that's basically what happened. I got cut, I changed majors to journalism, and then I worked at the campus radio station, and I was like, man, I'm getting into the games free. This is a lot of fun. My work on the air is horrendous. And believe me, I still have, and we may have included it in the Inside the NBA documentary, I'm not sure. But I know we put it on the air at one point. The first thing I ever did at WUOG was something called Hockey Corner, which was kind of a lesson for would-be hockey fans, because Atlanta had just gotten a hockey team, the Atlanta Flames. And I told the guys at WUOG, oh yeah, I love hockey. They said, good, okay, you get to do Hockey Corner. And so I wrote this horrible thing about hockey and how it's played, and the puck is this, and the sticks are this, and the lines, and the ice, and then my delivery was just horrendous, and I held on to that tape, and we played it on the air a couple of years ago, and everybody got a good laugh at it, obviously. But at that point, you're just amazed that you're on the air anyway, and you can't believe that the voice you're hearing is yours, and that kind of feeling just gets worse when you get on TV at the first time, because somebody hired me in Macon, Georgia, to anchor the news, and at that point, I was. Let's see, that's 1979. I was 23 years old and look like I'm 8. But everybody watched Channel 13 in Macon. And so there you go. Here's the kid. And it was so nerve-wracking because there were no teleprompters back then. There wasn't a lot of stuff back then in 1979. You're typing scripts on an old typewriter. This is a machine that has a keyboard, and these letters fly up on a page, okay? This is a typewriter. And you're making copies, and you're using carbon paper, and it's a messy process. And then you're reading the news like this because you have no teleprompter. And all the time in the back of your mind, you're saying, people at home have got to be hating this. And it was so hard to focus and concentrate on what I was doing because I was so concerned that of what I looked like. It was like, I could picture folks in Macon, guys saying, hey, Mildred, come over here and look at this kid trying to read the news on Channel 13. And when you go through that, it's like, am I ever going to take the next step? Is this the way everybody starts? And so after a year and a half in Macon, Georgia, I go to Spartanburg, South Carolina as a news reporter for a year at WSPA, and then apply for a job in Atlanta, having no idea if I'm good enough to get one. And WSB in Atlanta took a chance on me, again as a news reporter. And so one thing I want to tell you as you study and as you graduate and as you get into the business, and even those of you who are into it now, things happen. You may think, okay, I'm pigeonholed into this. This is what I'm doing. I thought I was a newsman. Even though on radio when I started out, I was doing news and sports, but I was going to take the first job that came up, and it happened to be a news job. So, I'm at WSB, and I'm filling in for one of the sports guys, doing a live shot at the ballpark before a Braves game. And this is after being there for 2.5 years as a newsman. And it's the same day that a new news director takes over. So everybody's a little jumpy anyway. A new news director, is he going to clean house? And here I am, I'm doing a live shot at the stadium. And I come into work the next day and he says, his secretary actually came in and said, Rabin would like to see you. I'm like, anybody got a box? Where do I put all my stuff? I said, so this is as far as this is going to take me, okay? It's going to be Macon, Spartanburg, fired in Atlanta, then what happens? And he says, and I walk into his office and he said, I saw you doing a live shot last night. I said, yeah. And he said, you ever thought about doing sports? And I said, I love sports. This is what I grew up with, or what I wanted to do. He says, well, I'm making a change. You're going to be the new weekend guy. And right there, the whole trajectory of your career, everything changes. The biggest thing I had to do at that point was talk to my wife and I say, look, I got a chance to go into sports. Oh, great. But it's going to be weekend. I'm going to anchor the weekends. And so that's going to kind of cut down on what we can do. And it's, wow. But it's one of those sacrifices, one of those things that you got to do. There are a lot of things in this life where you kind of give and take. And it's very important that there is that knowledge on both of your parts. That I'm going to be totally upfront with you, Cheryl Ann. We're not going to be able to do stuff on weekends for who knows how long. And she was good with that. And so, that's one of those things that it's a consideration. It truly is. But that changed my life. So I did six years of anchoring the weekend sports at WSB, and the folks at TBS called in 1989 and said, would you like to come and work with us? We'd like you to be the host of a show called U.S. Olympic Gold. So this is long before I did any NBA stuff. And U.S. Olympic Gold was our version of Wide World of Sports. And they said, we'd like you to be the host of that show. And then that will transition into the Goodwill Games, Ted Turner's Olympics in 1990, where you will be the host. And I'm like, okay, this sounds good to me, Get, stop working weekends, and they're going to actually pay you some more money, and it's going to be great. And then there's like a shake-up at the top of the Goodwill Games, and suddenly, no, Ernie Johnson's not going to host the Goodwill Games. Larry King is going to host the Goodwill Games. And Nick Charles is going to be on a side set, and Hannah Storm's going to be on a side set. And so I'm like, what am I going to do at the Goodwill Games now? And that was at the time when the Bo Knows campaign was going on, the Bo Jackson thing, where Bo knows this, Bo knows all these sports. Well, I was doing all the sports that Bo doesn't know. Okay, so I went from, I'm the guy who's going to host the Goodwill Games to, let's get a quick report on judo. Here's Ernie Johnson. Modern pentathlon. Our correspondent is Ernie Johnson. I had no idea what modern pentathlon was. All I knew was, I'd hate to see what ancient pentathlon was if this is modern. So those are kind of the things that happen, and sometimes, by divine providence, these things happen where a news director takes over, you're doing a live shot, suddenly your career changes. And then there's a shake-up and you're not the host anymore, and now you're doing those sports. But at the same time, they tell, TNT really gets its feet moving, and we got the NBA, and this is right when I had started. And so the second year, because I had to sit out a 6-month no-compete clause, which was a lot of fun. WSB wouldn't let me go on the air at Turner for 6 months for some reason. At any rate, when I finally was allowed back on the air, it was the 1990-91 season. Craig Sager had been in the studio. Sags wanted to be on the road reporting, and so they put him on the road. They put me in the chair, and been there ever since. And I never would have thought that was possible. But it's been the greatest fun I could possibly have. The show started out with me by myself, and it wasn't as good. And then Reggie Theus, Cheryl Miller, Dick Versace, an assortment of guests during the playoffs, and then Kenny Smith around 2000. He and I worked for the first time. A couple of years later, here comes Chuck. About 8 years later, here comes Shaq. And the three of us, the four of us, have, I grew up with older sisters, and this is as close as I'll ever come to having brothers. And when we genuinely love each other. We really do. We love our jobs, but we also would do anything for each other. So it's been a great run, and who knows how much longer it's going to last. I have no idea. Chuck has threatened, 50 times that that this is it. I'm done. And then it's like, okay. Well, I'll stay for 2 more. Okay, I'll stay for 3 more. But we all realize that sometime, like all things, it'll reach its end. But boy, we're enjoying the ride while we can. So that's kind of it's much longer than I intended to kind of give you background. But let's just talk. I know there are questions you've got about the show and about how it works, and I want to live up to the billing here of tips, tricks, and tales from hosting a studio show. So go ahead, and I'm going to pull this chair up just a touch, and fire away. Yeah, and please do me a favor. Identify yourself when you ask your question.
In the fall, and I just wanted maybe like some tips on just genuinely how to like make that work, coming up with a show idea and like the ins and outs of that.
I think one of the things, and this kind of points out the difference in the eras that we're in the business, because when I graduated from Georgia in 1978. It was like, okay, if you want to do sports, ABC, NBC, or CBS. Those were your outlets. Otherwise, you're going to work in local and, hopefully work your way up. There are so many more avenues now to be seen. From YouTube channels to whatever. If you want people to see you, you can produce content every day and put it out there. You don't know who's going to see it necessarily every time, but somebody stumbles upon that and says, wow, I think this kid's pretty good. And suddenly your work gets out there in front of millions of folks. And we've seen it not just in this, we've seen it in entertainment. We've seen singers who were YouTube sensations who suddenly, like, hold it, what happened about paying dues? And this, somebody goes on and plays the guitar and sings a song, and it's like, wow, everybody wants his or her stuff. So there are ways to get out there. I think what you have to try to do is be different, and sometimes that's even harder now because there are so many ideas out there. Paul Ryden is a good friend of mine. Paul used to be a reporter for TBS, and now he's an actor. And a great guy, but he was one of the best feature reporters I ever saw, and this is back in the 80s and 90s. And he and I were just kind of sitting around talking one day about, where do you come up with the ideas for these stories, and not just the idea for the story, but how it's executed. And he said, I sit here and I say, let me think of 5 ways that this story could be done, and now I'm going to use the 6th. And I said, that's great, because what he's done is said, this is the way all of these reporters would do this story. These are the 5 most common ways you could do this story. Now, I really got to think about what's going to make mine stand out. And I think that's... Is there a bottle of water? Somewhere in the back. Thank you very much. I think that's the key. You've got to make it stand out. And it's got to, you can't just say, well, here's a way to do it. It's got to be, but have I seen that before? And what's going to make mine different? It's the same way to me when you're putting together an audition reel. You're trying to get somebody's attention. And back when we were flooding the market as graduating seniors back in the day, and you're sending your tape out to everybody and anybody who would watch it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And you'd have some people say, okay, I'm going to put this reel together, and my best stuff is going to be at the end of this 15-minute reel, where it's going to build to this crescendo where, now that you've seen this and this and this, and I'll wait till you see this piece. And no news director gets past the first 2.5 minutes. They pop the tape in and they say, nope. They pop the tape in and say, show me something here, kid. No, I've seen that before. Every now and then, they pop it in and say, oh, hold on. This is a little different. This got my attention. Oh, that's a smart way to do it. Oh, that's creative. But if you just pop it in and it's the Wheeler Wildcats look for their 15th straight victory tonight in the so-and-so, and that's all it is. And it's like, okay, I've seen it. But what registers with the guys who make the decision, the men and women who make the decisions, is different, is creative, it shows thought. And so that's what you got to do. I mean, you may have an idea for some kind of a show, and then keep tweaking it. You say, and you know what? Sometimes it's like, oh, that'll never work. Well, make it work. Make it different. Make it something that people are saying, boy, have you seen this? Not, oh, I've seen that. But have you seen this? So that's my best advice on that, I think. Yes? Next question, and so the... No, go ahead. No, please.
I can't wait to see the inside the NBA clips and what you guys have to say about certain topics or guys analyzing the game, because I don't watch it.
Yeah.
When did you realize, if you do realize, how transcendent the show was outside the NBA? People were looking for those clips. And was there a moment, was there a segment where the light went on some years ago? Hey, this is bigger than just an NBA show.
No, it's a great question, and it's difficult to answer sometimes because I don't want to act like I'm buying into this. Oh yeah, I'm part of this greatest show in the history of television, and it's like that's not. I'm part of a show that a lot of folks enjoy and that we genuinely love doing, and I think it's made strides from when it was just a highlight-driven show where, I'm doing highlights and I've got one analyst with me and we're just doing highlights and scores and moving on, and sometimes the show was 10 minutes long, sometimes it was a half hour long, depending on if TNT or TBS needed us off the air so they could hit the next, edition of LA Law or whatever. It was like, okay, it's a real, I've got 8 highlights here, and they say, that's all right, we have to be off the air in 2 minutes, so just say goodnight. Okay, fine. But once we got more established with me and Kenny, and then with Chuck, and look, the man broke the mold, okay? He changed the landscape on these shows. Up until then, nobody ventured outside the lines of the court. It was all about this game is this game is important, this team is, and only when Chuck came, and really the first halftime show we ever did, me and Kenny and Chuck, and we had Peter Vesey in there for a while too with us. But I remember Kenny asking Charles as he sat down to do halftime with us, what are you going to say about this? And Kenny said, you'll find out. And that kind of set the standard for the way that show was going to go. It's like, I'm not going to tell you right now, here are the 3 questions I'm going to ask you tonight. So be ready. Or let's rehearse this. Charles, when you laugh, then Kenny, you say this. I'll say this. You laugh. I'll throw to break. We should be able to get that done in 1:48. There was none of that. There was no rehearsal. It was, and believe me, that's the way we wanted it. But from that first night when Kenny said, you'll find out, it established the fact that, look, just be ready for anything. And your reaction to the question is going to be gut level. It's not going to be something you've thought about for the last 3 hours. Certainly, if Kenny wanted to do a breakdown thing, he could tell the producer, he'd say, hey, I want to do this later tonight, and we'll do it. But that really established the way the show was going to run. And then when God forbid we had a 30-point game and we'd come out of the game and Chuck would say, I'm not talking about this crap. And it was like, well, what are we going to talk about then? But that's the way he would do it. And then and we would just go and talk about other things. And there were nights, when Charles would sit down, we'd be ready to do the pregame show. I've got, some ideas on where the conversation's going to go, and then Charles says, I got something to get off my chest. But with our show, that's okay, because we'd kind of established that. And I think, I talk about Chuck, breaking the mold. Look, he had built up the equity. He was the most quotable player in the NBA for ages. Anytime anybody needed a quote on anything, you go to Charles Barkley. And to his credit, he remained that person when we hired him. Because I've seen plenty of guys who seem to be, wow, this guy's glib, this guy's funny, hey, this guy's really loose, and then the red light goes on and they freeze up. And if that happens, then you got an issue. But for Chuck, for Kenny, for Shaq, they're natural. And when the light goes on, they're themselves. And, that was like my dad's best advice to me forever was just be yourself. And listen, and that goes for you guys trying to break into the business, men and women. Don't try to be somebody you think the news director is going to hire, because you'll get fired for the same reason you got hired. You got to be you. I've seen enough people who say, oh, I better make myself more high energy. I better do this. And it's like, stop. Be you. And I think that's where everybody on our show has kind of settled in very nicely. As for when I thought this was something a little special, I think it was just because we started getting a lot of traction from players in the league and from people who watched the show. And it was like, wow. And then, we're not in this to get statues, but then when your peers start recognizing you and saying, wow, that Inside the NBA show, then you kind of think, well, maybe this is a good show. Maybe it is decent. But I think, the feedback from the players, feedback from the league, that kind of told you that we may be on the right track. And then when you'd see that people were watching even through a blowout, just to see if there was going to be an international incident after the game. That was cool. But it's funny too, and I'll bring this up. Charles was early on. We would always promote the movies that were coming up next on TBS or TNT. So we'd finish up the post-game show, and I'd read, well, coming up next on TNT, you're going to enjoy this the double feature that we've got coming on. It's movie this and movie that. And Chuck would go, oh man, I'm not telling you all what to do, but both of those movies suck. And look, this is new for me too. At this point, I'm like, what? I mean, now I'm used to it, but back then it was like, oh, I said, Chuck, hold on. That's our marketing folks are not going to like that. Our programming folks are not going to like that. I'm just telling you, I've seen both of those. They're terrible. They're terrible. So here comes this directive from programming to our producers that say, tell Chuck to quit talking about the movies. If he doesn't like them, just tell him not to say anything. So the next night, well, coming up next here on TBS, we've got this double feature. Chuck says, I've been told that if I think a movie sucks, I shouldn't say anything, so I'm not going to say anything. But that's what, man, it was just so different. It was all the things that you were told you couldn't do on TV, that we were saying it's okay. You know, Shaq has a stain on his tie from dinner. We don't try to hide it, we zoom in on it. You know, and meantime, other shows are, hey, quick, fix it. You know, and I saw Grant Hill was sitting in one night, and he'd been making some notes, and he put a pencil behind his head, like he looked like a clerk at the grocery store, and he forgot that it was there. And I'm like, I pressed my button to the producer, said, don't say a word. I said, just be ready on Grant. You know, it's like, we introduce everybody, and I'm, well, look who's working cashier. Who's the cashier working aisle 3 here? He said, what? You and your oh, man. See, other places it would have been, quick, tell Grant to get rid of that. Don't shoot Charles tight, or don't shoot Shaq tight because he's got a stain on his tie. We live for that stuff, you know, and so it's no place to work if you have a thin skin, because you are going to get it from all angles, that's for sure. Go ahead.
Ian King, a junior at Wake Forest University and an intern with the NSMA. It seems like when you were asked to switch from news to sports, that was a pretty abrupt change. Can you talk a little bit about how you dealt with that and landed on your feet?
Yeah, I loved it. It was because I had that. I love sports to begin with, and I was kind of available as a news person anytime the sports department needed somebody, or if they had kind of a sports angle on and I'd say, yeah, I'd do that. I'd love it. But it was really just it was a great opportunity. It didn't feel to me like, like you're asking me to be the weatherman. And then I would have been, shoot, I don't even know the states. You want me to do and so I viewed it as a great opportunity, and it was a question of getting comfortable anchoring the sports, because I had gone from, the only place I'd really anchored was, you know, the news in Macon, and in Spartanburg on a morning cut-in every now and then. But it was now, I was producing a newscast, I had a sportscast, I had, you know, if they gave me 6 minutes, I say, okay, how am I gonna do this? What game gets this? How much time does this game get? Have I left enough time to do NASCAR? So I'm having to do all this, and that was really the biggest adjustment. That and the fact that back then, you know, I'm covering Georgia and Georgia Tech, and I'm a Georgia grad. But you'd be amazed at how, I think, you don't root for your school. Your allegiance kind of just fades away, even though you can be, you know. I had so many good friends at Georgia Tech, Georgia's arch rival, but I loved Bobby Ross and Bobby Crimmins and all these people. And so all you're doing is being fair. Yet I would still, on a weekend where Georgia and Georgia Tech were both playing football, and I'd give the Georgia game a minute and 15 for their highlights, and I'd give Tech's win over the Citadel 48 seconds. And I'd get back to the studio, and the phone would be ringing off the hook. We know you went to Georgia. We see how much time you gave Georgia Tech. Highlight 48 seconds. You gave Georgia. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? But that was the world I was living in. And so, part of that makes you kind of like, okay, you want to be fair and equitable. You also want to say, look, the Georgia-Tennessee game is bigger than the Georgia Tech Citadel game. You have to understand. I don't want to hear about that. You went to Georgia. Okay, fine. So yeah, I just think it really taught you a lot. That move taught me just a lot about the business, about producing, and about managing how much time this gets, how much time that gets, what's the importance, how do you weight the show, that kind of thing. So that was the biggest thing. But man, being on the air and getting those reps consistently, that was huge for me. And it helped that the folks at TBS were right there in Atlanta, and they're seeing me for 6 years doing the weekends. And so that was kind of, that exposure right there was really beneficial to having them give me a call. Go ahead.
Keith Murphy from Des Moines.
Hey, Keith.
When you go off script, as you so often do on the show, especially during the highlights, when do you know to steer back in?
It depends. But the funny thing about that is we have a Tuesday crew also. And for a while, they did a players only thing. And Shaq sometimes had to do the highlights. And he was being interrupted by the other guys on the set. And Shaq came to me one day and was like, man, that's hard to do. When you do those highlights and everybody's talking. And I said, welcome to my world, man. I said, when I'm doing the highlights after our show and you and I'm trying to establish why this is important, why, hey, look at their comeback. They're down 19. Hey, now it's 12. Hey, now it's 6. And then you say, Charles, I got a question. And I said, that kills the vibe. I said, so that, we've kind of built to this point, and then you ask a question that could easily be asked after the highlight. Oh, I understand. So then the next night, man, it happens again. It's like, so here we go, 8 seconds to go. Who's going to get the ball in a 2-point game? Chuck, is he the best two guard in the league? Stop it. So, but that's the way our thing goes. And Chuck's had these famous rants about various cities in the NBA. He's got this thing that's been about San Antonio that's been going on forever and ever. And it's just like some nights, the guys, they just need that. I don't know if they're getting bored or getting tired or whatever it is. But, okay, here we are in the third segment of the postgame show, and it's 1:45 in the morning. And, okay, Clippers in San Antonio. Kenny's, Chuck, what do you think about that Riverwalk in San Antonio? Just to get Chuck to get on his thing again. And then it's impossible. Then trying to do that highlight is impossible. I'm just looking for a spot to say DeJounte Murray had 25. And then you can continue with your next thing. But I think reeling them in or letting them go, it's all just a feel thing. Sometimes when they're having such a good time with something, you're not going to step in the way of that. But other times I say, hey, that's getting a little bit too much. Let's kind of center it back. So that's all feel. Go ahead.
You mentioned a piece of advice.
Oh, your name first. I'm sorry. Yeah.
You mentioned a piece of advice your dad gave you about being yourself. Are there any other pieces of advice that you've gotten throughout your career that really resonate or that you've passed on to the younger generation?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when I was at WSB, and my mom and dad were living in Atlanta, and they had a chance to watch me all the time. And my dad was, look, when you're doing the weekends, and it's you and a photographer and editor, there were nights where I didn't have a chance to throw makeup on, or shave. Because I said, well, I'll certainly have time to do that at 5:15, and all of a sudden you're editing golf highlights, and all of a sudden you got to be on the set. And I would get these calls from my mom and dad. Yeah, Ernie, you're looking a little rough today. You did not have a chance to shave? No, I didn't have a chance to shave or put on makeup or comb my hair. But I was on the air. Yeah. Come on. But Ernie, you got to look out. Make time for that. You got to look your best. Okay, I will, Dad. But his advice was, again, be yourself. It was also, I learned so much from him just by watching him. And I always tell them when I speak to groups, and talk up to dads, I say, look, you got to understand something about kids is that they have superpowers. They see and hear everything. They're watching everything you do. They're watching how you react in every situation. They're watching how you react when you're having a bad day. So they're always taking mental notes. It's not required that a dad sits down and says, okay, these are the important things. Here are the tablets. Here are the important things to being a professional and being a father and being a husband. They watch. And I'm the best example of that because I just took mental notes about my dad. So I'd watch him go to work. I'd watch how he showed up before everybody else. And I would watch how meticulous he was in his preparation and how he just treated everyone so kindly because he appreciated that they were the viewers and listeners of his work. And he's nowhere without that. And so those are the kind of lessons that I learned from him, is that you're not special because you got this job. Don't be that guy who says, give me the best table because I'm on TV. Don't be that guy. And there were plenty of guys and women out there who feel that way. Like, don't you know who I am? My dad never went down that road. My dad was like, look at me. I'm covering baseball. I'm calling baseball games, the game I love. And aren't I lucky? And so not only did I see that, but I saw some guys that he worked with who were the exact opposite. And so I think taking the high road, being humble, being appreciative, those are the things. Always realize that the jobs that we're doing, and I've said this a million times, this is a get-to job. I get to do this. There are enough people driving around going to work who view their jobs as a got-to. Oh, I got to go now. Now I got to do this. Man, I've been driving to work with a smile on my face for 30-something years at Turner saying, I get to do this. I get to go hang with Shaq and Kenny and Chuck. I know I'm going to laugh before I go home tonight. That's a great job to go to. Because we got a lot of folks who don't get to laugh at work. And I get to. And a lot of times it's at my own expense. I don't give a hoot. You're laughing. So that, I think those are some of the bits of advice, and it's not do this and you'll be successful. It's, hey, if you're successful, don't forget to handle it this way. And I think those are the most important things. Go ahead.
Brand Galey from WXYZ in Detroit.
Met you last night, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Been married for 6 years?
You're good.
Yeah.
Great. I'll keep tooting your horn
Yeah.
and kind of go off of your answer just now. I think so many people are in here because you're good, but you're also a good guy, and that's as well known as your success in your career. The show has been replicated, or at least tried to be replicated with personality-driven shows, but you guys have a way of making it less of a debate show, despite the fact that there are so many strong opinions, and yet it's seen as this kind of pure outlet for sports talk. How do you think you'll be able to do that?
I think what really helps is having three guys who come at the game from different viewpoints. Shaq and and again, Shaq and Charles have these head-to-heads from time to time where people are actually asking me if, did you think at that point they were going to, throw hands? No, it's not going to. These guys are not going to fight. They do like to wrestle around sometimes and just have fun, but. Look, I think they realize what makes a good show, and being forthcoming with your opinions. But what we've never had, and I throw Kenny in there too. What we've never had, and I'm proud to say this about the show, is that you've never had somebody take a viewpoint that they didn't actually believe. Because I think that's when you fabricate something, and say, okay, you guys are going to have a debate over this, even though you both feel the same way, you take this side. Look, this is not debate class. You know, this is, just tell me how you feel. And if you all agree, fine. You know, wow, we'll all join hands and say, wow, how about that moment? We all agreed. But I think that the way that they come at the game, and they can get a little fired up from time to time, but it's how they legitimately feel, and not a contrived, okay, let's argue about this. Most of the time those arguments and those disagreements come up. That's nothing we planned in a production meeting. Everything's organic about that show. These guys don't even go to the production meeting. They're not invited to the production meeting. We don't want them there. And that's the key to the thing. That is the key to the show. Because I've worked, look, I do baseball, I do March Madness, I do, for 30 years, a million different sports. There's a slightly different feel when all the talent are in the production meeting, because everybody then has a feeling, okay, we're going to do that, okay, we need this. When we do this show, they don't know what's coming. And half the time, I don't know what's coming either. But I think that's what keeps it entertaining for the folks at home who are saying, look, I don't know what's going to happen next on this show. And I'm like, hey, me either. Keep tuned in. And I think that's why it works. And nobody's ever been told this is what you got to say. And a lot of times it's whoever yells the loudest who gets heard. And it can be mayhem, but it's that spontaneous, unrehearsed nature. Because look, you can see other shows where it looks like it's been rehearsed 2 or 3 times. Well, that segment's been rehearsed. You know, there's no way this guy picked up that quickly on this. It was he was waiting for that word, boom, and now I'm going to say, and now this camera cut is perfect, and this is. Ours is just mayhem. You know, it's like sometimes they go to a wide shot just so the director can say, hold on, I need to find out what's going on here. Who's going to talk next? Who do I want to shoot? And that's great. You know, that's what makes it fun. Go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Johnson, Spencer Thompson.
Ernie, please.
Yeah, all right, Ernie. So one of the things that was not just prevalent from last night, but more so in the last several years, is that politics and more shown in light in sports in many different ways. And one of the things I respect, and I'm sure a lot of the people in this room respect, is that inside the NBA isn't afraid to address the tough issues and everything. Though over the last several years, it seemed to get more tough. And I love the bit you guys did, not the bit, the segment you acknowledged the Uvalde, Texas shooting and everything. You could see the emotion and the true belief. So when you go into those production meetings knowing you have to address a mass shooting, or you have to address the Black Lives Matter movement or something like that, how do you push through when clearly your emotions were showing as a grandfather and as a father, with your daughter being a school teacher? How do you push through those moments and as kind of a beacon of hope for your viewers to address it?
I think that, again, going back to just the nature of the show, once, the 4 of us have been together for as many years, in that we had built up the fact that you wouldn't be surprised when we talked about something other than basketball. Look, if everybody in the country is talking about a certain situation, should we be prohibited from talking about that because we're doing what we do? I mean, everybody else at their place of work is talking about it, and that's what we're doing. And then you can say, yeah, but they're not on TV. I know, but I think sometimes our discussion on it can help other folks deal with it. I mean, you talk about Uvalde. And I mean, that was one of those days where, I'm sitting in my hotel room and I'm doing all the hoop stuff and getting ready for an hour-long pregame show. And then something like that happens, and there's no question. It's not like, okay, let's all get together and figure out how we're going to address this. It's like, no, that's the top of the show. That's as long as we need to talk about it, with no restriction. And having producers like Tim Kiley, Jeremy Levin, producers of the show, and our executives, Craig Berry, Scooter Rotino, everybody, they realize this. And it's like, if we didn't say something, it's what's up with you guys? Are you suddenly saying that this basketball game is more important than what happened 5 hours away down in Texas? And so all you can be is yourself. And so when we're talking about this, and it was, I mean, that was a difficult thing, because I'm looking in the camera and I'm saying, look, this some 18-year-old kid just walked into a school and opened fire and killed 18 kids. And when you hear yourself saying it, it's like, man. And so then we're just ourselves. It's just talk. I mean, the best example I think was when Kobe died. When that happened, and we're doing that show from Staples, and we're sitting at mid-court in a darkened arena, and we're just talking. And for a basketball community, and for a world really that was like trying to wrap their heads around this, I think, and I'm not trying to say that, express some kind of self-importance, I just think when you've got us sitting around talking about it, maybe that helps you deal with it. Maybe that helps you cope. But those are the shows that you remember more than anything. And I'm just glad we have the freedom to do it. Well, they're having a time in there. What the heck panel is that? And look, got people getting up to go see what it is. What is going on here? Man, I don't know what's going on here, but I just heard a guy go, yee-haw, and now they're out the door. Thank you for stopping by. We appreciate that. Go ahead.
Chris Lewis, Boise, Idaho. Remember Adam Lefkoe was talking about the kind of advice that you gave him when he was doing his at the Tuesday show, and it was like, that road traffic cop that create car crashes, and that's like kind of the formula of inside. But you do that as well as the NCAA tournament, as well as doing play-by-play for the ALCS and NLCS for baseball. So, what is your process for figuring out the right approach for the situation that you're in for a unique environment, especially when you're doing it early on for one of the first times?
I think it's a know your role kind of a situation with me. Look, I'm trying to get us from point A to point B to point C. The producer and I, I'm in the production meeting. The producer and I have to be in lockstep. I've got to know what he's got available. He's got to know how I like to get to different places and that kind of thing. And we're going to bring Shaq and Kenny and Chuck along for the ride on this. And you just have to be able to react when things happen that you don't anticipate, maybe, or those nights when Charles says, I got to get something off my chest. Okay, everybody take a deep breath. Let's see where this goes. But in my mind, it has always been, how am I going to make these guys look their best? Whether I'm doing play-by-play with an analyst, whether I'm working with Jeff Francoeur or John Smoltz or Cal Ripken or Dennis Eckersley or whoever, or in the studio with Curtis Granderson and Pedro Martinez, Jimmy Rollins, how am I going to get these guys where they can be their best? I think the biggest problem, and I used to have the problem. Sometimes I still do. Was saying, what I have to say is really important. It's more important than what these guys have. No, it's not. These are the guys who played the game. That's who the people want to hear from. They don't want to hear what I have to say about what's going to go on in a game that has 2 seconds left. But they want to hear from the guys who've been in the huddle. So I want to get these guys there. And so I think that kind of simplifies your job, but it also centers you on how am I going to best prepare to make these guys their best? What kind of preparation do I have to do? Okay, and for me, prep is everything. Okay, you can't show up. You can't just show up and say, oh no, these guys are so funny, I'll just show up and wing it with these guys. No, because you have to be the one who reads the quote out of the Denver Post that says, oh man, when I throw this Michael Malone quote at Shaq, I know Chuck is going to come into the intersection and broadside him. That's what you got to be thinking. What's going to be one of these moments that somebody's really going to jump on and love to talk about? And so that's how I do my prep. I do a lot of numbers and everything else and things that I've been doing for years simply because it puts me in a comfort zone. I keep a daily log of every NBA game. Every game played in the season, who the 3 or 4 highest scores were for each team, what the score was it overtime, anybody get hurt? And I've got this, and then I can go back and we have a matchup, and I go back and I look at, okay, here are the notes I took on the times they met in November and the time they met in January. Maybe that's going to help here when we discuss this game. So I do all this stuff, and 90% of it's never going to get on the air. But you know that going in. But that's the fuel that drives you to the next show. And if it ever gets to the point where the prep becomes a burden, good night. That tells me, get out. If doing the work, I mean, the show is a blast, but if doing the work leading up to that becomes a burden, or you say, man, I just can't look at these, then you need to go. But for me, that's the fuel, you know. Then I get to do that show and hang out with those guys. Go ahead.
Rusty from Raleigh asked this question yesterday.
What was my answer then?
At the Final Four, you never left the podium. Charles left, Kenny left, but you were there for 8 to 10 hours on Saturday. Carolina game, 18 lead changes, 12 ties against the Duke. And you were so focused. Can you tell the kids today about your work ethic that day where you were working? The camera, you never turned around. You were in your game, which was all about getting ready for the next time you guys were back to talk.
Well, I did get up a few times. I do have to go up. Like after the pregame show, I go in and got a cup of coffee and a cookie and brought it back out to the set. But see, it's how everybody wants to watch the game. You know, Chuck may prefer to be back in the green room watching it. Doesn't want to be, you know, because if Chuck's out there, everybody's going to be yelling at him anyway. You know, it's like he wants to be able to focus his way. And for me, I like to be able to look at the monitor. Oh, we're getting ready for halftime. I like to be able to look at the monitor and watch the game, hear the crowd, get a feel for the whole atmosphere, you know. And so, especially when you're used to just being in the studio and you're watching the games on a monitor anyway, it's nice to be out there in it and that electricity. So that's kind of, you know, I keep a running log of, okay, this was a 10-0 run. Okay, that was a big hoop there. That was a huge turnover, because when halftime comes, I want to throw this out at the guys. So it's whatever makes you comfortable, and that's what makes me comfortable, is just being out there kind of in the middle of it, and then not having to, you know, be in the green room with 3 minutes left and then having to go out and maybe miss something. And so that's, again, it's just however. You can't tell anybody, this is the way I prepare for a game, you need to do that. Because we all, and the longer you're in the business, you know everybody has their own style. Everybody has their own way of preparing. Everybody has certain ways that, Steve Holman, you know, there are certain ways that you want to put notes down that you can reference something. Okay, that guy's 6th in the league in scoring. I just had that jotted down right here. You know, so you all have different styles. Nobody has to go the same way. And that's what makes it beautiful. Go ahead.
Ernie, we'll make this the last one, so then we'll break for lunch. So last
This is the last question, but again, if any of you students or anybody, when we're hanging out here when we're done, you want to hang out, ask questions, you can do it.
Dayton Williams working with the NSMA this weekend. I was just curious. I think it's pretty easy for a lot of the younger, gentlemen and ladies that want to get in this profession to want that instant gratification. It's easy to look at the top and wish for that, because that's where a lot of the fun and money is. But what was it when you started your career that kind of kept you determined to ultimately make it? And even when you had started out early on, what was pushing you to kind of climb that ladder?
No, that's a great question, Peyton, because I think you're looking for some kind of, I don't think I was looking for immediate like gratification or immediate, success or monetary, windfall from anchoring the news in Macon, Georgia, where look, I wasn't getting paid anything to anchor the news in Macon in 1979. And I mean, it was like, if whatever comes in first, the power bill or the car note, that's gonna get paid first, and then the other, I'll get it to you when I can. I mean, it was one of those things. And you can ask my wife too, because I met my wife down there in Macon, and she was the drive-through teller at the bank where I used to take my checks, and she was working her way through school, and I would drive in, and and she said, "What do you do at WMAZ?" And I was like, "I'm the news anchor." What do you mean? What do I do at WMAZ? She said, "I'm in school. I'm working 2 jobs. I don't get to watch the news anyway." But eventually we would get married, which is awesome, and it'll be 40 years in August if we make it. So that had nothing to do with your question. But what keeps you going are the little moments of affirmation. And maybe a news director or somebody come in and say, "Hey, that was really a good job." Or, "Hey, you did I like that story." Or you're looking for those little things, and a lot of times, I think that's something that our business is really bad at, to tell you the truth. I think a lot of people are put on the air and said, "Sink or swim," but we're not going to help you. We're not going to tell you how to succeed. We're just going to see if you can succeed. And I think what's really important, especially when you're young, is having those moments where somebody says, "Hey, good job. That's what we're talking about. Hey, your delivery on that was really good." And at the same time saying, "Just slow down. You were really talking fast on that newscast." You just wish somebody would tell you that sometimes, rather than, after 4 months they say, "We're replacing you." Why? Because you talked too fast, and because you did this, and because you don't. It's like, why didn't anybody tell me? That's what I think at this stage in your career, you crave honest feedback. You want somebody to tell you, "That's not very good. You've got potential that's not really good. That's not your best." You don't want to crush somebody, but you don't want to say, "You know what? Geez, you're Vin Scully. I mean, I just listened to 40 seconds of your tape. You're Vin Scully. That's it." No, you want, hey, you know that? You want honesty. So be your own worst critic. And ask people, "How am I doing?" Because that kind of tells you, look, I may be on the right track. They seem to like what I'm doing. Look at your tapes. Be honest with yourself. You watch yourself back and you watch a mistake, and it's like, oh my gosh, how am I still employed? But it's like, that's where what keeps you going. It's just a drive, like in anything. How bad do you want it? I mean, how bad do you want to be in this business? And you can say that about any business, because if it's threatened, it's like, oh no, I can't let that happen. But if you say, well, easy come, easy go, then maybe that's not where you wanted to be anyway. But be the hardest worker in the room. And I tell that to college kids all the time. I said, you're looking around at your buddies and your friends here, and you all want the same job. And I know they're your friends, but you got to be the hardest worker in the room. Where, when the professor says, "Who wants to?" I do. Don't you want a room full of them putting their hands up? Hey, okay, I know we're late, and I know you guys got to eat, but look, I'll be out there, man. If you want to ask more stuff, be happy to do it. But thanks for your attention. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.